get absolutely crystal clear on two things. What problem do you solve?
Mm-hmm.
And I try to get people to describe the problem they solve with one word.
Okay.
Because the lack of focus creates generality. The second is obsess over your customer. If you're just getting started, obsess over who they are and where they hang out.
Hey there, business enthusiasts. Welcome to the Chills Podcast, brought to you by Allweather Roof. Because just like a sturdy roof, our conversations are built to last. I'm your host, Brent Loberg, and we're about to dive into the world of business, family, and the moments that give us those exhilarating chills. Ever wonder what keeps successful people inspired? Well, get ready to find out as we chat with some fantastic all-weather customers, partners, vendors, and friends. We'll explore their triumphs, challenges, and maybe even some unexpected secrets. After all, business is not just about numbers. It's about the people behind them. So grab your metaphorical popcorn and join us on this journey. Get ready to be inspired, maybe even get a few chills of your own. This is the Chills Podcast. Let the goosebumps begin. Well, introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is Craig Espelien. I am founder and president of 1201 Partners, and I am a solopreneur, so I work for myself, and I tell everybody that my boss isn't the greatest, but at least he lets me do what I want. And my main function with companies is I help them see over the horizon. So most CEOs are the captain of a ship, and too many of them get enamored of the coast that they're near instead of doing what a ship is supposed to do, and that's sailing for the far shore. So I help them see over the horizon and start planning how do we mitigate risk while moving on to greener pastures, better markets, whatever it might be. And I've been doing that since 2014.
Okay.
That's kind of my job. I've had a lot of, I worked for SuperValue, Fortune 100 company, worked for Petco, worked for a bunch of other companies. And in 2014, I just said, I'm working like a consultant. I might as well have the freedom of a consultant versus going into an office every day.
Mm-hmm. So since 2014, you've been on your own?
Yep. Been an independent here in the Twin Cities. I don't do much outside of Minnesota for sure. But outside the Twin Cities, because I've had my fill of travel. I've been to all 50 states and not just the airports. Been to China multiple times, Australia, Germany, England, Greece. So I've done the travel thing, and my wife's got some health conditions that she would prefer not to travel with, and that's fine with me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So what were your degrees at the U of M?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Economics, and I have a MBA in Finance and Marketing.
Okay. And you kind of combined that with your business.
Yes. Yeah. So I usually, my entry point is typically marketing.
Okay.
Because understanding why end users make the decisions they do and how to influence those decisions. So if you think of it in a grocery store, because that's where a lot of my experience is, knowing how to influence how the consumer makes a choice at the shelf, on a display, or even what store they go into is kind of how I guide people on building their business, because there's really three levers that any business can pull. They can do things that drive top-line sales, they can do things that drive bottom-line profitability, or they can do things that aggressively manage the expense line. And so every business has the exact same levers. Mm-hmm. It's how they pull them that makes them a little bit different.
Okay.
So whether it's a B2B or B2C, business to business or business to consumer, decision-making is all the same. There might be more people involved, like B2B, you've got the actual buyer, you've got the person you got the end user, you got the person who actually signs the PO, then you've got the influencers, HR on personnel decisions, merchandising on product decisions, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And in the consumer world, it's very much the same, because there's the buyer who is the end user usually, and then the influencer. And both sides look at value the same way. They look at, what's the cheapest I can buy it for? Where do I get a little bit better value? Where do I get into the premium world, and where do I get into the luxury world? So think of it as an automobile. You got Chevy, GM, Buick, Cadillac. It's kind of the perfect value for the consumer and really for the business, because the business makes the same kind of decisions. They see, where's value better for me, and do I have to pay more for that? An example from when I worked with Land O'Lakes on their Purina feed business. One of the major issues that a horse has is ulcers. And so they did all this research on how to solve for that. And they were engineering feed all the time, so this was nothing new for them. And they were touting how big this was going to be, but then they realized that there were other homeopathic ways that owners got rid of ulcers for their horses. They weren't willing to pay more for the feed. But they'd spent 3 years on this research, and it turned out they didn't pay attention to what the consumer really wanted. They looked at something they could solve. Let's go find a market for it, rather than saying, what's the end user saying, and how do I create a solution to that?
Okay. I read something somewhere, and you probably know the psychology behind this, of if you're at a grocery store and there's an item that's fully stocked versus almost gone, people will buy it if it's more fully stocked. In my mind, I would think, well, it's almost gone. People must really like it. Do you know that answer?
I think that's a bit of a fallacy, because so in the grocery business, facing, which is what it's called when you pull everything up to the front, everybody knows that's fake. Even the consumer knows it, but the retailer feels good because the shelves look nice when I look down the aisle.
Okay.
But the consumer typically they'll stop and look at the offering. So think canned vegetables and how many brands and flavors there are. And they'll make the decision based on value. So they'll look at the pricing, they'll look at what catches their eye. And the last default, so the final piece of the decision, is signing. So in the private label space, you call out value with your compare and save sign. You merchandise the private label to the right of the brand because most people are right-handed. And there's the last chance of I can switch, and they'll reach for that private label more often if it's on the right.
Really?
So the stocking has a little bit to do with it, but when you get into like clothing, nobody will buy anything from a perfectly set up table of sweaters or shirts. If it's mussed up a little bit, people are much more willing to browse through and find the size for themselves. So yeah, it's consumer psychology is extremely interesting. Even if you go into any sort of store and you put a barrier up where they can't go one way or the other, they'll move to the right, they'll all go in the same direction. So they're a little bit like sheep. So you can train them to go in certain directions, which is why the grocery store set up the way it is that we want people to shop the perimeters where there's more money to be made, higher profit margins, and you don't want them loading up their basket with a lot of cheap goods, because then they start limiting how much more they buy because my basket's almost full.
Oh, wow.
So again, it's those things that when you get really good merchants, in our corporate retail group, when I worked at SuperValue, we had two great merchants, Ron Dennis and Bill White. They operated stores on the East Coast, and these guys were just amazing with how they could manage consumer flow, manage consumer demand, and create mental imagery. And Ron is the best example. He had 25 items that he was priced better than anybody else in the market. He was higher priced than everything else. But these are 25 items that consumers recognized the price on. So even if they didn't buy it, in their mind, he was creating, this is an inexpensive place to shop, even though they were paying a premium for a lot of other stuff. So you're right, the psychology has to be looked at when you merchandise.
Okay. How have you navigated running your business just by yourself without any employees?
So I've had partners in the past, and most of them, we ended up not going very far forward because they don't want to take the risk. And so for me, it's all about time management. And coming out of a corporate world, I was a little bit lazy when I first started, because you work in corporate and you work an 8 to 10 hour day. And if you pare it all back, and so am I actually working, you're working about 5 or 6 hours, because the rest of it is water cooler talk, going from meeting to meeting, being in meetings where it's like, why am I in this meeting? When you work for yourself, you start that same thing as working 7 to 5. And you feel lazy if you're not working. Well, I become much more project focused. And part of that is being a consultant is the access to your time is the only thing you have to sell. So you have to be smart about how you sell it. So when I get paid for outcomes and output, the client dictates how long do they think it will take. If it takes me longer, then I'm just getting paid less per month if I charge a flat fee for monthly support. If it takes me less time, well, that's because I know what I'm doing. So I minimize my risk by understanding how long it takes me versus their expectation. And so the other thing that I do is I offer them 24/7, 365 access. I never wanted to be like a lawyer where every call is a 15-minute charge. It's like, call me whenever you want. It makes no difference to me. And that's really helped me build the business, because they feel that I was talking about Valley Pastries just up the road here, and Alex, one of the owners, he would call me 8 o'clock at night on the weekends because sometimes he just needed somebody to talk to. And I was fine with that because they're great guys to work with, and I got free donuts out of the deal.
Yeah.
So how bad can that be? But it was really a benefit to him that he knew there was always somebody that could counsel him, guide him, find him different ways to go. And so managing the time becomes all about how much do you want to interact with your clients, how much needs to be on site where they can touch and feel and know that you're right there versus what can I do in my own office at home and then deliver the results.
Okay. What's your ideal customer?
Oh boy. If I had that perfect answer, I would never have wanted for work. But the best way I can tell you is it's somebody in the food business. They are in the 50 to 75 million range because they can afford an external consultant. And they've had the same approach for the last 5 to 7 years. And then the true bonus is when they brought in a new C-level person or a new leader of one of the functions that realizes that change needs to be made. Because as a consultant, I can come in, I can ask all the hard questions, and I don't damage any of the incoming relationships the new person's trying to build. I can break a lot of stuff and fix it and leave them with, gosh, that guy was a jerk, but man, he helped us do a lot of good things. Because I'm only going to be there, 3 to 9 months if I'm doing my job right. I've never been one of those consultants that I don't want to be a fractional. I don't want to work for 18 to 24 months for one customer and just do the daily function. That's not, I did that in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Don't want to do that anymore. So, and I tell the people that this is how long things are going to take. And usually it's no more than 9 months. Now, I've my clients today, I've got a couple of longer term projects because they need to completely shift how they're going to market. And so it's getting people ready for that while we deliver results on some short-term things as we lay in the long-term plans.
Okay. So you started in 2014. Tell a good story how you've helped a customer. One of your favorite stories, how you've helped one of your clients.
Oh, boy. Well, Valley Pastries is probably a really great local example. So 2 guys that bought the business from an old couple that had just worn themselves out running the business. One of the partners is what I call a legacy businessman. He wants to grow and expand. The other is a lifestyle business, means he wants to work the same and just make more money. So he's not worried about expansion and growth, just wants to maximize what's there. So when you balance those 2 needs and are building one entity going forward, it's giving them the tools to do all the things necessary. So it took me 9 months because they remodeled. They took over the store next door, gutted everything, remodeled. And I managed that project, plus built them a marketing plan and kind of gave them the tools to expand their business. And they've always wrestled with, do we go with 1 store or 2 or 3? In the retail world, 1 store is great. 2 stores will break your back, and 3 stores is where you start to actually see the benefits. Because with 2 stores, you have to manage them day to day. You're not making enough to say, I'm going to hire managers. When that 3rd store comes on, then you can step away and hire managers and work on the business versus just working in the business. And so they decided to stay with 1 store. They are maximizing everything in the back of the house. They finally broke down and they bought a food trailer. So now they've got this huge, think of a typical food truck, maybe half again as big. And they're going to use it to go to the state fair and to different events where they can transport the donut shop and the recipes anywhere they want to go.
Okay.
And for me, that was just a great step to get them to take, because for Alex, the legacy guy, now they can expand the brand and get it out from the Medicine Lake Road location. For Mike, it gives him a chance to, he's a creative marketing guy. He's beyond what I would ever want to do. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just his thought process is very cool. And my only goal is to try, let's get that back towards the middle just a little bit. But now he's got another thing to play with. So for him, it's a toy to go out and can we draw traffic? Can we drive traffic to a new location? And so getting them to take at least a minimal risk, but having a brand and a product that they can be proud of and a process, I think is what I took the most pride in.
Yeah. I liked how you kind of work with both personalities and kind of formed it with the food truck and that idea.
Yeah, and because we had talked about a food truck early on, and I said, well, a food truck is like going to the farmer's market. It's a lot of work, and it's not necessarily a lot of payback. But that's why they went bigger, so they could be parked in a place for a week if you needed to. And I think that's the next step. I think they'll eventually open another store as Alex has kids, and as his kids get older and want to get into the business. Mike doesn't have any kids, and I think that's why he's okay with the lifestyle side of it. Is
Sure.
he likes what the business can provide him, but there's nothing to pass it on to. So, but yeah, they were the most fun because they were really good at making and selling donuts. They weren't really good at building a business. So to be able to add that for them and put them in contact with designers, legal people, all the contacts that I've built over the years to help them with specific things, I just thought was amazing. And they were appreciative because, they only knew what they knew. So we just had a lot of fun doing that project.
It's a good story, and I bet they have fun taking the trailer places.
Oh yeah, yeah, they do. And when I went to see it, so Mike called me one day and said, "Hey, you got to come and see the trailer." So he took me through a whole tour of the trailer, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this thing is like the Taj Mahal of trailers."
So they went all out on it.
Yeah, they did. Yep.
A couple of years ago, I had a similar idea with Allweather Roof. So I didn't build it, but we bought a trailer and we built a coffee trailer with it. So we take the trailer when we bring coffee and donut. We actually use Valley Pastries. We're bringing donuts to customers and our employees at the job sites.
Okay.
Employees can come down and have coffee and a donut with the owners. The owners come out, same thing.
Yep.
Just gets them to kind of mingle, and just talk a little bit. Now, what I always say is roofs are super expensive, so people can spend anywhere from $10,000 to millions of dollars on a roof. And at the end, we hand them a warranty. So it was kind of my way of thanking them and giving back. Like, hey, instead of just a warranty, here's a donut, coffee, come mingle with us and get to know us a little bit.
Well, and it's funny because I did some work with Daikin Applied, which is up on 169, closer to 494, 694. And like a roof, they make a sale, and it's 25 years before they make that sale again to somebody else. And they didn't have a marketing department. So they were really struggling with how do we stay relevant in those relationships so that when it comes time to replace HVAC, we're the first brand they think of. And it's very similar to a project I did at Land O'Lakes because, the decision-making is the same, is that farmers, they don't change feed until they have a problem. Well, that might be years. And they were sending salespeople to the farm gate every week. It was adding no value, so we turned on a marketing program. So they understood the brand and why it was better, what it did different, all that kind of stuff. So in those longer-term purchases, to your point, you make the sale. But what do you do to keep people appreciative of the fact that, geez, we worked with the right partner? And if those people that made the decision, so let's say you're doing roofs for a housing development, I know you guys do more commercial and industrial, if I read the stuff right. But if you're working with a Pulte or a Hanson Homes or somebody and are doing roofs, the next development might be from a guy that you worked with when he was at a commercial space. And so when you do those kinds of things, you're right, you keep your brand top of mind. And then if you can leave some of the trinkets and trash behind, like Post-its. I always love giving Post-its because then it's 25 opportunities for them to remember your brand and for other people to see it. And then whatever that quality tagline is that makes them think about, why did I choose them to do my roof? It's always a reminder so that next time they're in the market, it's who they're going to think of first. And so I like that approach. It really is, to your point, giving back, but it's also keeping the brand there that goes, these guys went beyond just the transaction of selling a roof to, hey, let's go to the job site and make sure they understand that the roofing company is concerned about the whole project. Because my guess is you guys know all sorts of different contractors that work on all the different pieces. And if somebody asked you, you'd say, oh yeah, I know a guy that can do electric or somebody who can do HVAC or somebody who can do sheetrock or, whatever it might be that's needed in a commercial building. So building that trusted partner context makes you the preferred place to go, no matter what your price is, right? Because people don't want to they don't want an economy roof.
Sure.
They're going to want something a little bit better than that. And so doing those things is going to say, and service is a big component in any business, but especially with those items that are 25 years or 20 years, however long some of these things last.
Yeah.
So good job.
Thank you. I like the Post-it note idea.
Yeah.
By the way, that's awesome.
Yeah. People give cups. I'm okay with coffee cups, but everybody's got one.
Yeah.
And pens, but people lose them and don't care. But Post-its, and people have a million Post-its. But one that sits there and it's got that brand on it, they put it on their computer screen, they're reminded about it all day long. They write a note for their coworker, put it on their screen, they see it all day long. So I've always loved those things that can be used again and again. We even did some like lens cleaners, the wipes that were branded, because people love those things. They need them everywhere.
Yeah.
And having a brand on it's like, oh yeah, I remember those guys.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I just thought of a good idea, actually.
Okay.
How about a coaster that's like a Post-it, but every day is like a new coaster. You peel it off.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Share with the audience a tidbit of advice for entrepreneurship.
Sure.
You started your own business.
Yep. Get absolutely crystal clear on two things. What problem do you solve? And I try to get people to describe the problem they solve with one word.
Okay.
Because the lack of focus creates generality. And then when you tell your story, people go, well, that doesn't apply to me. So when you can get very focused and tell that tale, people that aren't in your sweet spot, like I said, mainly CPG, but I work with companies in technology, I work with pet companies, I work with not-for-profits. I work with a lot of different companies, but they all got introduced to me because it connected to CPG. And then the second is obsess over your customer. If you're just getting started, obsess over who they are and where they hang out.
Okay.
Because if you know where the people go that you expect to buy your product or service, then you know where to put your advertising dollars or invest your time.
Okay.
So like for you, if let's say that all roofing customers went to if they all listen to Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
then, okay, Joe, here's who I am. I want to either be on your podcast or advertise on your podcast, because all your people are going to be there. So, and I teach them to do it locally, because clearly Joe Rogan would be a little bit more expensive than most advertising would have. But think of all the Facebook groups, think of all the YouTube channels where people that are interested in roofs might go. And a friend of mine, a guy named John Anderson, who used to be with Channel 4 and did a lot of he was a producer for Channel 4. And now he's an independent, and he works with emerging companies to build their brand awareness through video. So he was talking today about how much he likes to fish. And it's a great analogy, because I like to fish where the fish are. So what we were talking about is, we'll find out where the fish are, then you go fish there. So anytime you can identify where your customers hang out, like with the donuts, insert yourself.
For sure.
So yeah, it's understand the problem, because then you'll know how your solution applies, and obsess over who those customers are.
What's your one word?
It is, now I'm thinking about it because I have it written down, so I don't have to remember it. Golly.
And if it's...
I'm going to say it's innovation, but that's not it, but it's, because there's a word that's a blend of focus and innovation. One of the things that sucks about getting older is finding the right word that you absolutely need right now.
Sure.
It's not as easy as it used to be, but it's, and part of it's, we talked about the vision part, the ability to see over the event horizon. And that's what it relates to. So it's all about that focus.
Okay. I like it. All right. So the name of the podcast is called The Chills.
Okay.
Not the chills in like a scary way, but the chills in like that feel good that make the hair stand up on the back of your neck or on your arm. So what about your job or your entrepreneur journey gives you the chills? A story, or just, it could be anything? Yeah.
So there's two. So I've built a pretty good network, but there's a guy named Paul Taylor, and Paul used to work for International Multifoods. And Paul's in his 80s now, and he's been a mentor of mine for a number of years. And I get the chills every time he sends me an email, says, hey, I got a guy you should talk to. Because it's somebody he's met, and he is a master networker. And I only get business from about 10% of them. But the fact that there's somebody out there that thinks enough of me to say, you got to meet this guy. And then the second is when I'm working with a client, and most clients kind of drive their business by looking in the rearview mirror. They're very attached to the way things used to be. When I finally get them to look forward and get the aha moment of, now I can see the future clearly, or the potential future clearly, that's what gives me chills, because it's like, okay, I'm doing what I need to do. and they're reacting to it versus, no, I'm going to hold on. And again, back to the ship, that's the anchor chain that keeps them tied to the dock.
Yeah.
It's like, let go of that and let's look towards the horizon.
Okay. Very cool. You got any hobbies?
I do. So I'm a bit of a wine, I won't say connoisseur or snob because I'm not really that, but I'm a student of wine.
Okay.
And so I try and learn about the different types of wine I've got. Obviously, my anchor is the ones that I've had and really enjoy. But it's helping others understand wine and pairing wine with food and being able to match at a restaurant a single wine with a set of different dishes. I always really enjoy that. And then I'm a passionate golfer. I'm not as good as I used to be, but then I'm not as young as I used to be either. But we have play in a Tuesday league with a friend of mine from the neighborhood, and then our neighborhood has a Thursday men's group that we play at courses around the Corcoran area.
Okay.
So, and I still follow quite a bit of golf. Don't watch as much on TV as I used to, except for the majors. I take the days off when the Masters is on, because that to me is the official start of spring, whether spring has come or not here in Minnesota.
Sure. Are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yeah.
He kind of got started in his dad's liquor store as a wine business, and he started this wine library TV.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen some of those episodes, and Vaynerchuk is a very interesting guy because he is opinionated. And, when you get to that point where you can share it and not worry about it, I aspire to that someday.
Yeah, for sure. So are you a red or are you a white wine guy?
So it really depends. As we get closer to summer, I shift from heavier reds to lighter reds into whites. But I love them all. And there's a couple, I don't understand Malbec. I don't understand Pinot Grigio because there's other varietals that I think are better than both of those.
Okay.
I've had really good Malbecs, but in general, to me, they just kind of taste like dirt.
Okay.
But that's just me. And then the Pinot Grigios they're vanilla. They're just so plain.
Okay.
So.
You got any favorites?
I do. And one of them, I'll give you a couple of stories. My first expensive bottle of wine that I ever bought was from a vineyard called Lancaster, which is in Sonoma County. And so I've had a love affair with Lancaster for probably 25 years.
Okay.
And when we lived in California, coming out of 2008, there was a lot of economic unrest, which meant a lot of the good wineries were discounting their wines because they were full and nobody was buying high-end wines right then. So I was able to be a member of their wine club, even though it's really expensive, for 3 years. And so I have a vertical and horizontal of 05, 06, 07 of their 3 varieties.
Okay.
And so they're still amongst my favorite. My absolute favorite is Franciscan Magnificat, and Franciscan got sold a couple of years ago, and they don't make Magnificat anymore. But when we bought our first condo, we got 2 cases of 1998 Magnificat, which was just an astonishing year. And it had all the things I like about wine, a little bit of a leather backdrop, some spice, and then a little bit of fruit. And it went with everything. So it was heavy enough to be good with a steak, but, with like shellfish and barbecue, it was just a great wine. And I don't have any 98s, but I have a few years left.
Okay.
So, and then I'm a big Syrah guy, but again, good Syrahs are a little more expensive than my pocketbook can always afford, but I have 3 different varieties of an 06 Syrah. Then I bought 6 bottles of each. A friend of mine and I split a case. And the first year, we got them in 2009. And the first year they were terrible. They were so tight, and they tasted green, like if you were chewing on a green stick from a tree. Now they're astonishing. I only have 2 bottles of each left. So every couple of years I open one to, okay, where are they now? Where are they now? So now they're ready to drink. So I have to start drinking some of those because they're starting to get to the end of their useful life.
Sure. How long can it sit on the shelf?
So if it's taken care of properly, which means you keep the cork wet and you keep the temperature kind of below a certain threshold, Cabs and Syrahs and Bordeaux's, some of the Italians like Barolos, 20, 25, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
There's a white wine. It is Beringer Private Reserve Chardonnay.
Okay.
Now, if you like oaky, buttery Chardonnays, buy this, but hold it for 5 years. Never drink it unless it's at least 5 years old. And then I had one the other day, and it was about 10 years old, and it was amazing. But normally I don't keep Chardonnays that long.
Okay.
But these you have to, because to me, what I want that caramely, buttery, vanilla flavor. And it takes 7 years to get there.
Okay. You said the word vertical?
Vertical.
What's a vertical?
So a vertical is years in a row, 05, 06, 07.
Okay.
And then a horizontal is what I've got in the 06 Syrahs, same year, different varietal or different wine from different vineyards.
Never knew that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So if you can drink verticals, there was a Carlton Cellars, which was in Portland, Oregon. They're now closed. They closed during COVID. I have a 13, 14, 15 vertical and horizontal of their two, their Yamhill Cuvée and their Rhodes End Pinot Noirs. And those definitely need to start to be consumed, because Pinot's over 10 years old. They still are really good. They just get a little brown around the edges. So They're starting to turn over the top.
So what kind of occasion makes you open a bottle of wine you've been waiting for?
So have you ever seen the movie Sideways?
Don't think so.
Okay. So Paul Giamatti is the main character, and he's exploring wine with a Virginia Madsen, and she asked, do you have any wines that you're holding on to? And whatever it is, it's a Chateau, it's a French Bordeaux. And she says, what are you waiting for? And he says, well, I'm waiting for a special occasion. And she says, any day you open that will be a special occasion. So there's two things that I tend to wait on. We have some friends, Gary and Terry Meyer. We have dinner with them every month, our house, their house, out. And usually when they come over, then I'll open some of those good wines. And then a friend of mine, Mike Jadrich, that I worked with at Super Value many, many years ago, he and I have had some really fine wines together. So he's the other person. When we get together with he and Julie, then they'll open some of those and talk smart.
Very fun. Yeah, I like it.
It actually is. So, but there, you make memories with those kind of wines, and you want to share those with people that mean something.
Yeah, I like it. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, you can give me a call on my cell phone, 612-845-0064. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I have two accounts there, my personal account and then 1201 Partners. Or you can reach me via email at cespelien@gmail.com.
Okay. Great. Well, this was fun.
Yeah, it was. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Super fun talking to you. And that's a wrap, folks. A huge thank you to our incredible guests and, of course, Allweather Roof for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed these conversations as much as we did, don't forget to hit subscribe and share the chills with your fellow business aficionados. Remember, it's not just about business, it's personal, and it's all about the people. Stay inspired, chase those dreams, and let the chills guide you. Till next time, this is Brent, signing off from the Chills Podcast. Catch you on the flip side.